Hi, friends. You've arrived at the space in between. I'm your host, Dinine Sig. I'm an attorney, a mom, an author, an entrepreneur, and a widow. You are in the right place if you want to learn how we will navigate life's transitional moments, both good and not so good. Together, we will find the magic and bring the light to anything you are dealing with. Come sit with us in the space in between. Hi, everyone. We are here in Broad Ripple, and we are in the space in between. I have some lovely women with me here today, and I am so excited for you guys to take a listen to this episode. Today, I have with me Sidney Eisgruber, really known as Sid Eisgruber or Sidney Cero Eisgruber. Sid has a company called Optimal Living, and the reason she started this is in order to help seniors and their families maximize their independence and optimize the quality of their life. So we're going to have a conversation today about loneliness, seniors, people that are affected by it. And with that, I am also really excited to have with us Dr. Bobbie Jellison, also known as Dr. J to her patients. And she started with her husband, Dr. Bobbie Jellison. They started the Jovial Family Farm. And the reason they started the Jovial Family Farm was, I believe, from our conversations prior, was in response to the pandemic initially, the loneliness that she saw in her senior patients and their community. And so the Jovial Family Farm is here in Broad Ripple, and it was started in order to promote really higher quality of life, joy, seniors living at their best with younger people in the community, sort of an intergenerational location where young kids could come and work with seniors on some of the farming, and jump in here if I'm missing a piece of it. But the joy was one of the most bigger pieces that I saw when I visited the farm, and how you sort of try to weave that into what you're doing there. I toured the farm last week, and I was completely impressed by how it seemed to me that everything is sort of contemplated with the idea of a senior that might be visiting or living there at some point.
Yes, that's correct. So the goal ultimately is to maximize joyful living for all that's involved, with a focus on allowing seniors to thrive as independently as possible and as healthy as possible. We decided to come up with the farm in a way for seniors who were living in our community to get out of their houses during the pandemic and see others in their community contributing to the same purpose, which is joyful living in a very, very sad time for everyone. And nothing brings people together more than food. I mean, it just crosses all age barriers, cultural barriers. It allows for learning and growth and creativity. I mean, it's just awesome.
I think that is a wonderful cause and a wonderful way to expand some of your effort. Not that you're not a busy doctor already and a mother of children that are both in high school and college and now contemplating grad school. I know Sid also has 3 children, so we'll talk about where they are too. But I think to add that on as an additional purpose for your life, it's beautiful. And what I saw and what I have been seeing, I have 2 parents now still that I'm so thankful they're still here. But my dad has recently changed his living situation. And about a year ago, he moved into housing that has some assistance for meals and cleaning, but they're left a lot on their own to sort of find the exercise class or the people that want to play Rummy Cube. That's one of my dad's favorite games. And so I found myself calling this sort of high-end housing and saying, I need someone to go and knock on my dad's door and take him to a class, because he is looking at the beautiful sheet that you put out every day, but he's ultimately alone in this very expensive housing. It's not program, but a housing situation in Florida. And he did sort of make some forays into some of those classes and some card games, but he ultimately, after about 6 or 7 months in, had a crisis of loneliness and was calling my sister and I and asking us, I know you guys can't live with me. I know you can't be here all the time. I don't want to put that on you, but I'm really lonely. And I was so proud of him for being open about that at 80 years old. And again, sort of tried to workshop with me living between 2 different states now and my sister having a child with cancer that needs her attention. How can we get this man what he needs? And so when I mentioned the Jovial Family Farm to him, he was like, oh, I wish there was something like that here. And my mother, who never expresses any loneliness to me and seems to have a full life, she was even more verbal about the Jovial Family Farm. When I told her last week what I had done with my morning, she was like, that sounds amazing. And then she's like, can people live there? And I said, I think at some point they may have housing for about 6 seniors. I don't know if I got that right. And her answer to me was like, wow, wouldn't it be great if it could be 50 at one time and they're farming with kids from college and they're eating together. And I was like, I can't believe my mom, my country club mom, who feels like she doesn't have an extra minute in her day, is talking about that. It really impacted her in a way. So I just want to say that for whatever it's worth, that both of my parents were excited to hear about the farm, and I wish they were here. So let's talk a little bit about what you saw. I'm going to go back a little bit, and then Sid, I might ask you to jump in too. Let's go back to 2020, and we all got this notion. I know in New York City, it was the idea that if we just stay away from each other for 2 weeks, isn't that so funny now when we think back to the pandemic and how, again, I can't speak for Indiana, but in New York, 2 weeks did nothing. Our curve just kept going up and up and up, and things were locked down. There were 12-foot fences around every outdoor park. It was absolute hell. My late husband, was in a nursing home, and they stopped letting any of us in. And as you both know, Sid and Bobbie, right, Dr. J, that the population in the world, the demographic that needs the most interaction with their family. So all these people in nursing homes in New York were now shut-ins with not enough staff that was getting COVID and couldn't, even when they didn't have enough staff. And then it went on like that for almost 10 months. And I actually prayed that my husband would get sicker, so he would get sent to a hospital, because the hospital was allowing 1 visitor per day for 4 hours. And he did. He finally got sick, and I still am grateful for that time. And we were able to see him every day, me and my kids. We would switch off. So tell me, I know this was what made you want to start the Jovial Family Farm. What were you seeing? Was it similar to what I'm describing?
Oh, absolutely. It was devastating, not only to the patients, but also the staff members. Our interaction was limited to 15 minutes per patient, and that was, putting on the protective attire, entering the room, trying to figure out what they needed briefly, and then to exit as quickly as possible. And over time, we just started noticing that the patients weren't necessarily passing from COVID or the multiple comorbidities that they may have had, but due to isolation, loneliness, a lot of them just stopped eating, stopped talking, and it was really noticeable in our patients suffering from dementia. It was astounding. And so I would come home and I would talk to my husband about what things I could possibly do in that short 15-minute block to bring hope and encouragement to the patients, get them interacting a little bit more. And my husband, he was like, well, keep thinking of good things to do for them. How many times can you possibly go to their rooms to interact with them? Can you increase the frequency, even though the duration of the time spent is short?
And that must have been hard because you had to gear up every time.
That's correct.
And then ungear and go to someone else. And then if you wanted to go back, right?
Correct.
Like just going through that in my head right now.
Right. And then, you also have to take into account the supply aspect, remember? Because everything was limited. Gowns, gloves.
Masks.
So Yeah, so you're like, I want to, but financially, can we do this?
Right.
If I use up all the supplies, then what? No one's going into those rooms, right? And so I was very, very lucky to have been in contact with several of the different restaurants here, bakeries here. We had a couple of the owners of the bakeries here in Broad Ripple who actually assisted us in throwing parties for some of the patients in those facilities.
That's amazing.
We would send them love notes and love pastries, and the staff love notes and love pastries and breakfast. And I mean, that's amazing. We just went all out and had fun parties. We decorated the hallway with balloons, flowers, and that way, in their short period of time working with a therapist, they at least had something joyful around them. And they could take pictures and send the pictures to their family members again, so that their family members knew that they were surrounded by love, even though the family members weren't with them.
That's wonderful. Sid, did you have any?
I remember I had a client who was doing very poorly. He had a fall, so we had to send him to the hospital. And before he went to the hospital, I had his wife dictate a note. I said, let's write him a note so when he's in the hospital, we know we're not going to see him. We'll have the nurse read it to him. To Bobbie's point of let's get some type of stimulation going. So I met the nurse in the lobby with his, items for clothing and a few little hygiene products. And I said, there is a letter here that the wife has dictated, and I want to make sure no matter what you do, make sure he gets that note. The nurse looked at me and promised. Now, I know they're very understaffed, stressed out, and this is a main hospital in Indianapolis. He was there for a few weeks. Again, didn't have contact with him. He had a hard time as a senior working his phone. So again, the communication was horrible. Picked him up a few weeks later. You could tell he hadn't been shaven. He had lost about 10 pounds. His pants were sagging off of him. He lost his upper denture. He lost his glasses. Okay, all of this happened when family wasn't around. I was his care manager. I couldn't go in there, had very little contact. And I picked him up to take him home. I was going through his bags and putting things up in the home. And what did I see at the bottom of the bag? The letter that was never opened. And that just broke my heart more than anything, because I thought all I needed you to do was take the time to read the letter to give him some sense of communication to his family.
A connection. Keep that connection. Yeah.
So that to me, and then I started thinking, we've got to learn from this. Two, we could have, looking back, you think of those things, but what if the hospital hired students who were home from school, who were interested in just caring or giving back? They signed a release, they put the PPE on, but they went. Maybe they had 10 people in each hallway where they helped them work their phone. They helped FaceTime family members. They cleaned the dentures or, made sure the glasses were clean. So I guess I look back on that time, and one, I hope that never happens again because the isolation hurt so many people. But two, we need to put things in place to make sure this isolation doesn't hurt, these seniors and other people. So that was kind of one situation I had. And I do want to kind of touch on what you were saying about your father. So as a care manager with your dad, a lot of my clients' kids live out of state. So I am here in Indiana being that person who manages their health care, and I serve as their advocate. So for your father, one of the things I would do as his care manager is I would meet with him. If we can do more preventative care management, that's going to be helpful. I would meet with him. I'd grab the calendar at the facility. I'd talk to him. I'd say, what are your interests? Let's highlight everything you want to do. Let me reach out to some other people who want to play that game that you like.
Yeah.
And, let me find it. Maybe there's people, maybe you like to read and there's a book club we can get together. So I would utilize my skills to help your dad find that socialization, because it's all about purpose. And that's what I love about Jovial Family Farm. And that's kind of how Bobbie and I connected. I overheard what she was doing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, purpose, occupational therapy, care management, seniors, bingo.
Yeah. It was like your lottery. Like I won.
That's our jam. Yeah.
I feel great just having met both of you and spent some time at the farm.
Thank you.
I'm like, I can't believe I didn't know this was here. And I'm so thankful to you, Sid. When we sat down to have coffee, it's like 2 months ago now, but that was one of the first things you brought up. And oh, what a great path.
Well, I have to say, Bobbie is one of the most creative. You've got to look at her Instagram. She's so creative and giving, and they live at the farm. Okay, these are doctors who could live wherever they want. And I love the fact that Bobbie is a servant doctor. I mean, she cares about people. And I think that's what attracted me too. I'm on the advisory board of Jovial Family Farm. And I'm so glad to be there because I love what Bobbie and her husband stand for.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to send that right back to Sid. I mean, Sid and the women that I've met thus far that work with Sid, they are advocates to the fullest. I never have to question what they're doing, why they're doing for their patients. I mean, they come to their appointments and they are spot on. They track all of the information from the patient's moods to what they're eating, any sort of changes, even changes that the nursing staff at certain locations don't even notice. I mean, they're spot on it. So I cannot speak highly enough regarding Sid and the women that work with her. But Sid, on a whole nother point, is just amazing. From her family, I haven't had the opportunity yet to meet her children, but any sort of derivative from Sid is
Here's my Sid story.
Awesome.
I'm going to jump in with the Sid story. I haven't had the chance to meet your family either, but we have rotated around each other or been in each other's orbit just from me moving here and knowing similar people. And we met for coffee, and this older gentleman came over. And he just looked really interested in both of us. He saw that we were engaged with each other, and I think he wanted to be a part of it. And we were coming to the end of our coffee time. I know we both had somewhere to go. But what I loved is I am normally the first one to try to suggest something, but sometimes I'm with someone who isn't that way and wouldn't have been open to it. But Sid was like, let's get your name and number and let's meet with you. He kind of asked if he could sit with us or could we meet him I don't know how it came up, but I was like, oh, she's my people. Because I would have held back and not offered that, thinking you would be like, what is wrong with Dinine that she's inviting this older man who we don't know? And then you did it. And I was like, I love her. And then unfortunately, my summer was cut differently and I had to spend way more time in New York. But that's something I really saw about your integrity coming through, or your kindness.
Well, I want to say this. So that gentleman I've seen, he goes to our church, my church. I see him walking in the neighborhood. That intrigued me. And then when we brought him over, like, his background is amazing. And I know Bobbie probably feels this way, and you do too, but when I'm at, let's say, a nursing home or a facility, you see room 10, room 11, room 12. And to most people, that's just someone laying in their bed. But everyone has a story, and it's back to this purpose thing. How can we pull each person out of that room? And I love when facilities highlight each person. Just like the gentleman we met at the coffee shop. We learned a little bit about him. We are so excited to meet with him again to learn.
I hope we do it before
we will.
Yeah.
And I know Bobbie feels the same way. Again, I feel like it's all about purpose, and everyone has a story. Everyone has a story. And if people cared enough to ask people about themselves, I just think, again, that's so important for everyone, but especially our seniors who feel isolated.
Right. So I think that's why we decided to do intergenerational farming. The kids need the seniors and the seniors need the kids. This year, what we're going to be focusing on at the farm is grand friends. So we want to pair our seniors with college students, with high school students that they are drawn to. Not just you go with this person, you go with this person. I really want them to form
like
a
organically
bond.
sort of gravitate towards each other.
Exactly. And one of the things that we find is very common in our seniors is the loss of loved ones, friends, all around them. So we frequently encounter individuals that say, I'm ready to die because I have no one. All of my friends, my family members, I'm the only one left. And so I think that pairing a senior with people that will hopefully outlive them will give them hope, a reason to continue to thrive and to...
100%, because that is one of the things that I kept in my mind for my dad. And every time my sister and I discussed a decision, I was like, he's got to have hope. And you just said that. I had a really difficult year where I went almost a whole year with no hope. It was self-inflicted. I was angry at myself for making decisions and being with someone and putting myself in a position where I could be decimated in an instant. I think every age you need hope to be able to move forward. And I was so concerned that my dad would lose that sense of hope, because I know what it almost did to me when I had friends and I had at times places to go and it just didn't matter. I think that's something that we could probably do another show on, is how do you bring hope to people? And this show, my show, the reason I wanted to start it is because of my foray into loneliness when I was a soon-to-be widow without a lot of resources in the heart of New York City, with friends, with people all around, but very few people understanding a neurological disease that made my husband look similar to an 80-year-old man, and having to navigate that with initially a 7-year-old and a 9.5-year-old. That's when it started. And you're not in the same stratus as the rest of your friends at that point. You go into a whole different zone, and the loneliness can be also severe. And the reason I started this show is that we're talking today about loneliness among seniors, but it's to bring light to that. Like, the whole mission of the show is to bring light to dark moments. My dad went through a dark moment this past year. You experienced a dark moment, Sid, with your patient. That was very dark. And I think the family, and we're all lucky that he came out of that and didn't end up a pandemic statistic that wasn't even related to COVID. And the same thing with you, Bobbie. The people that you've seen, they're lucky that they had someone at the helm like you deciding, hey, let's do this with the bakeries. But there are a lot of people out there that are not lucky. They don't have someone in their corner. And so that's where the Jovial Family Farm, I hope, could still meet those people, even if you don't come across them. And maybe there's a way for people to reach out to you if they have a family member that isn't one of your patients but wants to be a part of it. And we might put that in the show notes if you're open to that. Sid, I kind of wanted to switch over to you for a little bit and ask you, like you said, if you were in Vero where my dad was and you were doing his care for him. I did, by the way, try to do that. So did my sister. We took the sheet when I visited there. We highlighted it. We called him in the morning to remind him, hey, there's a movement class at 9 that you were interested in. There's a trivia class at 3 that you were interested in. Sometimes by the end of the day, he would say, oh, sorry, sweetie. I lost myself. I fell asleep. I didn't go. So it was a repetitive thing. And it wasn't until he expressed his loneliness and was willing to go see someone that he started coming out of it. And I don't even know that it was therapy that helped him. I think he just got tired of really being lonely. But I'm there trying to act like a Sid. I'm highlighting, I'm calling, my sister's calling, she's visiting when she can. What do you think for someone in this area in Indy, or maybe someone who's listening right now in Oklahoma or somewhere else, do you think there is a national resource you could mention, or even an Indiana-based resource, or just ideas that you have for people that may not be able to engage your services?
Sure. Well, a few things. I'm a member of the Aging Life Care Association, and that is a wonderful association. So if you knew someone in Montana, New Jersey, somewhere throughout the United States that needed someone like me, a care manager, to serve as their advocate and help manage their care, you could go to that website, put in the zip code, and professionals like me that are certified care managers would pop up. So I've let a lot of people know about those resources. So they're out there. A lot of people don't know that we are out there. In fact, I've gotten calls from people saying, gosh, my brother used someone like you in New York City, and we want to find someone here in Indiana. We just learned about you. So that's a wonderful resource.
Do you mind me asking, I'm not asking your rates or how it's, but is there a scale on how it's figured? How do you decide, or do you have just set rates for someone to engage your services?
They'll vary. I know in Indiana, to hire a care manager, a certified care manager, I think it's between $95 to $250 an hour. So it's not everyone can afford us. There are other resources to help people. I was going to mention, Bobbie was talking about during COVID. Those are things she did. I reached out to our Jordan YMCA off of Westfield Boulevard, and I said, hey, I want to help. I said, can I help lead a class once a month for seniors who are isolated, just to, even pull out an article in the paper, or how can we get these seniors together? And they're like, well, we don't really have anything like that or have thought about anything like that, but we do have our senior lunch and learn, which we've stopped. If you'd like to reinstitute that. And I thought that would be great. So I did that, and it's still going. It's the third Wednesdays of every month. I would find a guest speaker, and then we'd find someone to provide lunch for free for the YMCA seniors. So what happened was this group, and I never started this group initially, so I can't take credit for it. I reinstituted it. So we started out in a small room of 10 people, then we grew to 15, 20. Now they're in the gym meeting, because I think we've had up to maybe 120 people.
That's amazing.
It is. And what's nice about it, again, people need a sense of community. They need to know that they can go back and they'll see the same faces and have, kind of catch up where they left off. And I was going to say, as a care manager, my services are not covered by Medicare. Some long-term care insurances cover them. But I want to give a shout out to folks like SECOA. That's the Central Indiana Council on Aging. And every city has a council on aging. And those are great places for people to reach out to, because they usually have a care manager that can help navigate and find resources for folks. I also like the YMCA. Who would have thunk, but they have an amazing book club. Seniors meet once a month, and the books they're reading, and there's like 50 people in this book club. So in terms of isolation, I think just having a place to go. Catholic Charities, people don't think about everything Catholic Charities have. They have adult daycare, caregiver support. They have a senior companion program.
Wow. I always think of Catholic Charities because I'm a lawyer by trade. So I always think of legal services. I don't really think, and maybe meals. I don't think past that. That's quite an eye-opener.
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm on their advisory board, and I've said the same thing. I'm like, you guys do so much, but I don't think people are aware of everything you're doing. And that's just a few things I've mentioned. So I want to give a shout out to know that there are programs there, Prime Life Enrichment. They have a grief support that meets, something called Second Seasons, where if you're over 50, you can meet, exercise classes. Someone, I can't remember who, but someone has something called like a phone buddy system. So if your dad or if you knew someone who was lonely, and they would connect someone with a phone call every day at 2:00. So that person looked forward to getting a phone call. Who would have thunk, right?
How amazing is that? Because one of the things my dad has said is that I usually call around 9:15, 9:30 at night. But some nights I just can't. I'm out. I'm doing something with my kids or other people. So my dad has recently, this is like the 5th time he said it. He's like, I really look forward to that call at 9:15. He's like, I'm glad you're calling me in the morning on a Tuesday, but he's like, I like telling you about, what I did and what I ate. I sort of treat him like my kids, where I'm like, who did you sit with? I call it, his living is called Brennedy, and I call it Brennedy High. So I'm like, who did you sit with today? But he really looks forward to that. So I think that's an amazing idea that I never saw being wide scale.
Well, and it's free. So you have it would bring your dad purpose, but think of the purpose it's giving those folks who are volunteering. It gives them a purpose that they're helping and giving back. I also want to Parkinson's Association, the Alzheimer's Association. These guys have incredible resources. They have a hotline. If you need help and you're so frustrated, you call the hotline. There's the Jewish Federation. Like the Jewish Federation will allow you to have equipment on loan if you need a bedside commode or some type of device.
A walker or a
Absolutely.
wheelchair.
There's so many free services. And that's part of what I do as a care manager, is to help identify areas and give people resources for free, because things are so expensive. It's nice to know that there are places you can go.
And I can 100% concur, because I work on the Alzheimer's Association Congressional Action Team, and I have worked with the Walk to End Alzheimer's Committee previously. And they have so many resources that if you think a family member has dementia or Alzheimer's or some of those cognitive, or even now, I think some of the neurological stuff is being connected cognitively as well. If you see something where someone's forgetful, they have these initial tests online that are, I think, really a good marker. I don't know, Dr. J, if you agree with that. And they have so many resources that I wasn't aware of until I started working for them in a volunteer capacity. So that's another great resource. Sid, you're just full with great resources today.
Wow,
Thank you.
You said be prepared.
I don't have to. Okay, she outed me. So what do you think?
Can I add to that?
Yes.
I think that when people or families have someone who has Alzheimer's, their focus is just primarily on that individual with Alzheimer's. But can I just add that these services or these programs that Sid mentioned also have things in place for their caregivers.
The respite help.
Yes.
Well, and I'm going to say 40% of caregivers go downhill before the ones they're caring for. So if I'm assessing, I'm so glad you brought it up. Look, I'm passionate.
I know they're holding hands right now, guys. If you're listening, Sid and Dr. J are holding hands.
I don't know if that should go on air.
No, that's so good.
And we both have
because you're
husbands.
connecting not only verbally, but like physically on what you're saying.
So if I have a husband and wife team and I'm assessing the wife, I'm going to look right at the husband, because he is probably has the potential of going down before she does. So Bobbie is so right. People forget about the caregiver, and they're almost more important. It's like the oxygen mask, right?
Correct.
In the plane.
Correct. Exactly. You've got to put on your own oxygen mask before placing on the oxygen mask of the individual that
I kind of want to speak to that as a caregiver for a minute. So as you both know, I'm a widow.
Do you want to hold hands?
Hold my hand. I can't reach you, Sid. We're across the table right now.
Here you go.
All right, I'm going to hold Bobbie's hand for a minute. Thank you. But as a caregiver, I was told my husband had this rare neurological disease called MSA. And the doctor at the time and a few of the fellows that were attending said, maybe 2 years. Nobody really understood. So I set up certain things that I thought would last for 2 years. And it went on for almost 9. And I had a couple of friends take me aside at some point, and they were like, Dinine, I have read that the caregivers sometimes die before the people they're taking care of, because I really, with 2 younger kids at the time, I really wasn't making a lot of time for myself. The only thing I wanted when someone would reach out, I never wanted a GoFundMe or any kind of help with my husband, because I could handle him. I always wanted either a social interaction, a coffee or a glass of vino, or I wanted someone to help with the kids, because even though I had a full-time helper, it still wasn't enough for 2 kids that were extremely active in all sports all the time, and practices and dance. And so I always was like, well, hey, if you really want to help, could you take so-and-so here, or could you just meet for coffee? I don't need any financial help. And by the way, everybody goes through a financial downturn when there's a terminal disease. So I am not making light of that. I just had the basics covered, and I didn't worry about, if we were in New York City, so we gave up our car for a few years and that. But I just want to speak to that caregiver respite and like what Sid said, when she takes on a client, she's looking at both, if it's a husband and wife team. I don't know if you consider that when it's someone like me and my sister trying now to care for my dad. I don't know, Bobbie, what you're referring to too. Is it that your patients, you see that the person that's primarily responsible does start to, I think in some ways you do go downhill.
Sure.
Whether it's physically, you don't look as good, you don't eat as healthy, you don't make the time for sleep. I started sleeping with my phone. I did that for 9 years because I was getting calls in the middle of the night from doctors who couldn't understand my husband just on basic questions. So now it's almost like he's been dead over 3 years and it feels like I should still have this phone next to me. And before that, I used to sort of try to prioritize, like, this is nighttime, the phone goes over there. And that's sort of a bad habit that I picked up, but really it was out of necessity.
Sure.
I was going to do a segue for Bobbie. This is something I've learned Bobbie's done. Talk about caregivers. Tell them about like the CNAs that you work with, the program you've done to take care of the CNAs who are doing the hardest work.
That's
They're
right.
getting paid less at the nursing home than they are at a Burger King.
Yes.
But tell them what I just love what you've done there.
That's right. And we talked about this, and I'm sorry I didn't thank you, Sid. I'm very impressed with that as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I do the employee health screens for one of the facilities that I work for, and I found that a lot of the employees, they don't have access to nutritious meals, fresh produce. A lot of them live in food deserts. A lot of them suffer from morbid obesity, hypertension, diabetes, COPD, renal failure. Their health is just awful. And so I went to the admin and I asked them how the employees were going to do a good job taking care of the patients if they weren't taking good care of themselves. And so we decided to set up a produce market at the facility where we donate a bunch of produce not only to the residents at the facility, but also to the staff members that are there. A lot of the staff members, they're working 12-hour days, and they don't have transportation. And so asking them to work a 12-hour shift where they're arriving before the sun comes up and then
leaving
after the sun goes down. Exactly. And then stop by the grocery store and then get home and prepare a meal. I mean, that's almost impossible. And a lot of them are single parents, right?
Yeah.
So they are trying to take care of kiddos at home, still make ends meet, and just struggling. And so if we can just do this one thing to help make their lives better, and not only their lives, but their children's lives better, I mean, that's awesome.
That's an example of taking another dark situation. You have someone that's a little bit possibly overworked, a little bit maybe underpaid. It could lead to a sense of despair at times. I'm here from 7 to 7, and then I still have to get home, which is probably 45 or an hour away, right? And then I have to cook. And then I have to make sure that my little ones have done their homework or that their sneakers are ready for the game tomorrow, their jersey, their cleats. What you've done is so simple, but so necessary and so missing in, I think, not only in the senior community, but it's probably another conversation too about empathy at work. I have a guest that I've been speaking to that lost a child, and she's going to be on at some point, and her whole company now is about helping to bring empathy at work. And I love that you had this simple idea, but you've probably impacted so many people, not only the women that I'm assuming, I'm making a judgment here that most women are CNAs, maybe there are a few men, but the women that are also leaders of their family, and you're probably also helping to impact their kids. So not only the people they serve during the day, the seniors, but then themselves, their family, and maybe even their community. Maybe their mom is still living with them when they get home. I think that's just amazing. And I thank you, Sid, for pointing that out, that Bobbie's doing that.
Talk about thinking outside of the box and being, we're always focused on our work of helping seniors, but I love how Bobbie thinks outside of the box, and those are the people that we need to keep healthy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Here's your crown.
So if we were going to wrap this up and we were going to try to sort of discuss one last thing or put in one last tip, this conversation was about seniors, the loneliness that affects them, how to combat it. Sid, you've given us amazing resources. We're going to add them at the bottom of the show notes. Bobbie, Dr. J, we're going to add the Jovial Farm and that in the show notes. But what's like a last tip that if our listener is someone who is struggling with this, with an older parent or a spouse, what's something that you could say to them to sort of give them a little bit of hope?
I'm going to let Sid take it first because she's always awesome.
What would I do? I just think people are afraid to ask for help. I think that's
so true.
People are afraid to ask for help. And, you see this happen sometimes like GoFundMes where a friend knows that a person's in need.
Yes.
And that friend starts a GoFundMe for, maybe a situation that's gone awry. But I just think we need to be aware. I think as neighbors, sometimes when I take my walk, I'm like, I wonder who lives there. And I wonder, once I went by someone's house and there was a little old lady just sitting in there. And I thought, what's her story? Like
Curiosity. Empathetic curiosity.
Yeah, like where does she go? Does she have friends? Okay, that might be a nebby nosy neighbor. But to me, it's more as good citizens, we should kind of see who's around us. If you live around seniors, knock on their door, make sure they know who you are. What can I do to help you? So I just think we need to be good stewards and take a look at what's going on around you.
Take a minute and take a look.
Yeah.
The same way you did that made me so happy when we were sitting at Hubbard and Craven's. And you gave me that permission to also want to meet with that. I don't want to say his name, but that gentleman. And I thought that was just so, it still touches me.
Wow.
And I thought it was just so deep that you were able to just not go, okay, yeah, thanks for coming by. Like, we'll see you. But yeah, if people could sort of emulate that, I think that would change a lot of communities. Bobbie?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to both of you all for allowing me to be here and to discuss this topic. I think that there are a lot of people, most Americans actually, we have an avoidance, if you will, as far as dealing with our aging just in general. We try to avoid it like the plague. We modify our bodies to make us look younger. I mean, we do a lot of different things just so that we don't have to deal with the topic of aging. So if anything, I would say to take away from this session is lean into the uncomfortableness of aging. Embrace it. Learn more about it. Just lean into that.
So like a young person who's thinking of volunteering or being part of your program.
Yeah.
Like lean into it. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
It's not catching, but we all have it.
Yeah. No one's getting out of this thing alive. So,
Right.
I think instead of avoiding topics regarding aging, find out how to do it and what things you need to survive, what things seniors need to
And wouldn't
survive.
you say that when we say don't avoid the topic of aging, we could say the same thing about loneliness?
Absolutely.
When you have someone near you that is lonely,
Absolutely.
I think
Absolutely.
most of us are like, okay, good luck with that. But
Yeah,
lean
absolutely.
in.
Yeah.
I was thinking this, we all probably do volunteer work. And people are doing great things all the time where if we step back and we say, you know what, I'm going to use my time to volunteer for 2 seniors in my neighborhood. So you're not going to the big group where everyone
Right.
sees you, but yet you are offering your time to maybe 1 or 2 seniors who really need time. And that's just sitting with them and maybe talking to them.
You're creating an impact, a deep impact by doing that.
So you're thinking outside of the box, but you're trying to make a difference. And it doesn't have to be to join a huge group.
Well, I want to say to both of my guests, to Sid Eisgruber and Optimal Living, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
And to Dr. J, Bobbie at Jovial Family Farm, thank you so much, not only for the tour and the lovely bouquet, but for being here And Sid, thank you for introducing me to Dr. J.
Yes.
Thank you both. So
It's all good.
Invitation.
So thank you, ladies, both so much. And if you're listening, we're going to have a lot of notes at the bottom to discuss some of these resources. And you could always reach out on DinineSig.com if you have any further questions, and I can see if I can help in any way. So thanks, guys, for sitting with us on the space in between.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Remember that even in your worst days, there is always something beautiful. You just need to look for it. Until next time.